Welcome to the Arabian Traveler Poetry. Today with me is Elmo Shade. We will be discussing love, grief, and mindfulness through poetry. Elmo Shade received his formal mindfulness training from the Center of Mindfulness at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center, Vanderbilt Osher Center for Integrative Medicine, Duke Center for Integrative Medicine, Google's Search Inside Yourself Leadership Development Program, and is a graduate of the Institute of Mindful Leadership. He's an accredited and certified mindfulness teacher. He currently volunteers his spare time with Meals on Wheels in Washougal, Washington. Elmo is the author of 3 poetry collections. His latest release, A Glorious Poetic Rage, published by Atmosphere Press in 2021. He is currently completing his first Poetry Chapbook for release sometime in early 2023. Elmo lives and writes in the Pacific Northwest. Elmo, welcome. Also realized that you have several books, and I got the other one called Standing on One Leg. I'd like for us to talk a little bit, because I'm interested in grief and loss and love,
Sure.
And I know it's was a tough time for you when you wrote that book. But before, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into poetry, and I know you also are into mindfulness, and I read that you're also doing Qigong and different kind of. So I think I'd love to hear a little bit more on that from you as to how you got into these spiritual movements.
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed, so much. And I enjoyed your presentation at the open mic in Camas and your reading of your traveler work. I've read the entire book now, and just really inspiring. So you've been an inspiration for me.
Thank you.
I wrote my first poem in high school, believe it or not.
Wonderful, yeah.
And I remember reading it at the dinner table one night, and unfortunately didn't really receive a lot of positive reinforcement. And then many years later in college, when I was going to Memphis State University, I wrote a poem for my fraternity, and they actually adopted the poem as their national poem for
that's great.
Fraternity.
What was your fraternity?
It was Pi Kappa Phi, yeah. So
yeah.
I didn't pursue it after that. I just I got interested in other things, and then around 2013, which is less than 10 years ago, I began playing with writing some verses, and I had never taken a course in poetry. I don't have an MFA. I had never hired a poetry coach, but I love the written word, and I love prose.
Yeah.
And so I began experimenting with it. And then my first publication is that you held up just a few moments ago was in 2017, which was like 4 years later.
Yeah.
And then I've been a student ever since.
That's wonderful. So what prompted you, standing on one leg? It was prompted by personal experience, is what I read. And if it's not too much traumatic for you, would you mind sharing as much as you are able to?
Yeah, absolutely. I met my late wife in 2007. She lived in Seattle. I lived in Nashville, which you can probably tell by the accent. We fell in love, and she eventually moved to Nashville from Seattle. And in 2015, she was diagnosed with liver cancer, and her life was very short. After that, it was within 6 weeks of the diagnosis of her passing. And so for the first time in my life, I became a full-time caretaker. I had to quit I was working for myself. I was the sole proprietor, doing executive coaching and mindfulness training. I had to tell all of my clients that I had to take a break and care for my wife. And it was a result of, her passing that the majority of the poems in Standing on One Leg were written. As a matter of fact, just to show you how much I did not know, Mohammed, about publishing, when you read Standing on One Line, Poems of Love, Loss, and the Spaces in Between, the timeline is actually back to forward. So if you go to the very final poem in the book, is that final poem is the last poem I wrote while she was still living, about Sayalita Sundays. And everything back toward the front of the book, timeline wise, was my experience, after her passing, and then just really dealing with grief and understanding how I needed to recover mindfully and wisely, and with the good support of family and friends. So the entire book is about grief and grief recovery, and my dedication to Tracy Mitchell.
Well, you've done a good job with that, and I'm sorry for your loss. And
thank you.
I've done. I'm also a licensed counselor, and I've done those group where we've done grief, and we all wrote a poem, and that was very cathartic for a lot of us. So I was wondering if you would like to read us a poem, and kind of maybe tell us what prompted you to write it. And I know I mentioned that one, farmers and hunters, or hunters and farmers, and I think we were talking about relationships and love, and I'd like for you to perhaps read that one and talk a little bit about what inspired you to write it, and if anything about relationships, and what does that mean to you?
Okay, well, this actually comes from my latest collection called A Glorious Poetic Rage. Most of the poems in the book are about the pandemic that we went through for 2 years, and the social unrest in our nation as a result of the George Floyd incident. But this particular poem, Hunters and Farmers, birthed itself, out of my own revelation of my education, if you will. It might be helpful, Mohammed, first to read a poem out of Standing on One Leg, because it really sets up Hunters and Farmers and the impetus for me in writing that. And the poem in Standing on One Leg is called No Supporting Cast. And this is the 3 stanza poem. And this is after Tracy had passed. I once thought the deepest love only originates from an unconditional heart, the space between beats that holds no expectations or promises of ever after. Now, after years of trial and error, of brokenness, and the drama of being in love with being in love, I finally see that love stands alone. Love needs no supporting cast. That was the impetus for me, realizing that love needs no supporting cast. In the past, my relationships were predicated on being in love with being in love. It wasn't being in love with the person, who they were. It was being in love with the illusion of love. So Hunters and Farmers birthed itself after that. So when you think of a hunter, think of the person that's in love with being in love. When you think of the farmer, think of the person who's finally realized that love needs no supporting cast. And this is the poem, Hunters and Farmers. Hunters hunt, farmers farm. Hunters seek and farmers sow. Hunters attach, farmers let go. Hunters need, farmers nourish. Hunters expect, farmers extend. Hunters pine, farmers plow. Hunters hurt, farmers heal. Hunters always hunt. Farmers always farm. And that's all I'll say about relationships.
That's really wonderful. That's oh yeah. And as you're also doing things on loss and that, how do you work? I mean, it sounds like you're doing more volunteer work now, but are you still helping others with coaching? And if you can talk on that, and what kind of areas you help people with.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I've been really fortunate, Mohammed. In the last 7 years, I have been an instructor for a mindfulness company based out of Orlando, Florida, called Mindful, little E Mindful. And we offer live, just like we're live here, live trainings and education on mindfulness-based stress reduction. And so I'm one of 35 instructors that teach almost every day, at least one class. And we're worldwide. So you can log on from Singapore, Australia, Japan, Los Angeles. It doesn't matter where you are. You can log on and participate in the training. One of the ways that I've been able to reach out to individuals relative to grief is I recorded a 6-series episodes on grief recovery. So if you were to go to eMindful and type in grief, you would be privy to all 6 series. And it was really my experience stage by stage of working my way through that recovery process. And the other thing I absolutely love, and this is once a week, but it's my gift to the community, is I volunteer for Meals on Wheels. And why that's important is my late wife delivered meals.
Oh, wonderful.
Meals on Wheels. And she loved it. She just loved her customers, bringing them their food, getting to know them. And when I had the opportunity to volunteer here, when I moved from Nashville, Tennessee to Southwest Washington, I thought, why not Meals on Wheels? Now, I don't deliver the meals. I do the food preparation, and I pack all the meals for the drivers to go out. But that's just, I've been doing it now for a little over 2 years, almost 3 years. And it's just extremely rewarding. And I'm fortunate to have had that opportunity.
That is wonderful. Yeah. And that's kind of sort of, I'm social worker in by training and counselor. And so I did, in fact, still do a big portion of our work supporting older adults. And so I appreciate you doing that. It's wonderful work. Well, I want to ask you a little bit. I know that I've also read and I've seen like this latest book you wrote, Glorious Poetic Rage, was not self-published. And I've heard you talk about how, how do you give other authors who want to seek to have their books published, How did you do that? How is that different from self-publishing? Uh, I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about that and see if you can inspire the rest of us to go and find a way to get somebody to publish
Right, right.
our work, you know.
Yeah. Well, things have changed so much over the years. Now that self-publishing is huge. And when I first started, I still do not have an agent. But my first two poetry collections, Standing on One Leg, and then Coffee Grinds, both were self-published. I had a really good friend of mine who's an author in Nashville, and he guided me through the self-publishing process through Amazon Books.
Uh-huh.
So it was pretty intuitive to go through the process. The only thing that a person would have to do if they're going to self-publish probably would be really important to find a graphic artist, someone that is really skilled at design in terms of your cover and your table of contents and your interior. And there are a lot of folks out there that do this work. It's not that expensive. You're not going to, break the bank account getting a book self-published. Some folks do it themselves. I wasn't that skilled. I actually found a young lady in Florida that someone recommended, and we connected. And so I used her for my first two self-published books. But I really was motivated in this third collection by having it published. I think it lends a little more credibility. Poetry is not a high-selling
Yeah, definitely.
like John Grisham or J.K. Rowling, but it's what I love, and so I'm not motivated by publishing. But when I finished the book, I just sent it out to several companies that I found online, and you can find them easily by just doing a Google search. And I got a response from one company, Atmosphere Press, out of Austin, Texas. And they said, we're really interested in your work. We like your work. Do you want to work with us? And now understand that because I'm not a J.K. Rowling or a John Grisham, where they front you money, and then, with some of the publishing companies, you have to pay for their services. You have to pay for their editing. You have to pay for their design. And of course you get obviously a discount on the printing. But we came to an agreement on how much they would charge me for editing and design and all that my previous person did in Florida. And then the rest is history. And I think it's really in terms of design, cover, the interior, the poetry book, it was really the better quality. And whether I use them again, I'm currently working on a chapbook, my very first poetry chapbook. Hopefully I'll publish that in 2023. We'll see if I use the same company, but
that's great.
Let me experiment a little bit more.
Well, I had to look up, and I guess in the olden days, Chapman was like a person who peddled or sold books. So I had to figure out, what is a chapbook? So maybe you can describe to us, like, what would it look like, and what kind of poems would you have in it, or what kind of fables, or
that's a great question. I really have a little things reversed. Normally, when you're starting out in poetry, your chapbook is your very first publication. And then you progress from there in building your audience to a full manuscript. I'm a little reversed for that. I've got 3 published poetry books, and now I'm working on my first chapbook. Here's the difference, though, Mohammed. A chapbook is a smaller version of a poetry collection, of a manuscript. Usually a poetry collection would have 75 to 100 poems, probably 75 to 90 pages. A chapbook will have 15 to 20 poems.
Okay.
It's very short. And here's the difference. All the poems in the chapbook have one theme.
Okay.
One theme throughout. Every poem funnels into a person or a period in your life or something that has a common theme.
All right.
And so that's the difference in maybe a manuscript, which could be all over the board, with a poetry collection being really directed to one particular focus.
Well, good luck with that, and
Thank you.
I wish you a lot of good luck. Let's see, like any other advice you have for people dealing with grief. You've gone through that path, and I know it's hard, and any resources you can recommend for people to look at, and or
Yes, matter of fact, I just had a wonderful long-term friend connect with me in the last couple of weeks, who just lost her mom at the age of 92, and she's now going through the grief process. And it might be important too to understand and to point out, Mohammed, that grief is not just about the loss due to death.
yeah.
Grief is any type of loss, whether you have lost a loved one through divorce, whether you've lost a loved one through just a breakup in a relationship, a long-term relationship, whether you've lost your job in a career due to a layoff. Loss is loss, and we have to treat it as such. So two books, and not that a book is the elixir, but I'm a reader and a poet, and so I use those resources to help me work through those stages of denial, of bargaining, of anger, of guilt, and finally of just acceptance that I had to move on with life. So one of the resources is by Martha Hickman, and it's just a short book on meditations on grief, and these are all on Amazon books. Meditations on grief, and it's a passage every day that you read once a day on grief recovery. And I've not only used the book from January, or actually from October of 2015 to October 2016. I used it for 2 years.
Yeah.
So I read those passages every day for 2 years. And then the other resource that he's one of my favorite poets is Rilke, Rainier Rilke.
Oh, wonderful.
And he has several of his collections that his poetry speaks to the aspect of loss and love. And he was kind of a hopeless romantic anyway, Rilke was. And so a lot of his poetry is about love and loss. The other thing I would say is surround yourself with people who you love and love you. Try not to make this a solo act, and to go it alone, and to accept this one statement by Pema Chodron, who's a Buddhist mindfulness teacher. This one statement really resonated for me. She said, and this was a question: can you accept that you could not always meet your loved one's needs? Can you accept that you were not always able to meet your loved one's needs? And that in itself, that acceptance of that statement really eviscerates a lot of the guilt that we carry after our loved one dies, that it wasn't enough. We didn't do enough. We weren't there enough. And so we get to a point of letting go of that guilt. That was huge for me.
Well, that's really deep and powerful. I want to thank you. I think we have time for you if you like to end us with a poem, and I'd like to, if you want to let the audience know about the open mic you have, and also after you read the poem, you can let us know how folks can get a hold of you and if they want to learn more about you or about the open mic, that program that you have.
Absolutely. Well, let me just say that our open mic is the third Monday of every month, starting at 6:15 in the Camas Library in Camas, Washington. And it's open to all ages. So we welcome you to come in and sign in to read. We have a featured poet. You were our featured poet last month, and a great response from your presence and your presentation. So we encourage you to do that. You can reach me at Elmo, ELMO, at Elmo Shade, ELMO, SHADE, just my name.com. I don't have a website, but I am on LinkedIn. So if you type in Elmo Shade on LinkedIn, you can find all the information probably that you might need about me.
Yeah, and I must say, like, as your Camas is a wonderful little town. I when I went there to read, thank you for the invite. I stopped there. There's like plenty of nice restaurants and food places, and very quaint town. So I highly encourage that.
Well, let me read. And do we have time for one poem? Do we have time for one poem?
Yes, you betcha, yeah.
Here's and I know you focus on love and forgiveness. So this is from Standing on One Leg. It's called Already Complete. Nothing kills the sweetness of love more than the bitterness of shame. You got busy with living, as if living and loving were separate things. Then you find the yin needs the yang to breathe, to move through the muddy water, risking being vulnerable, naked in the moment of terror. In the moment of grief, you surrender. You give to your body what it has yearned to receive. Not something acquired, but that which is already complete. Loving yourself.
Thank you so much. That was so wonderful. I would love, I'm sure I'd love to host you for another topic at a different time, but like I mentioned, we like to keep those short. Thank you so much. And I look forward to talking with you more in the future.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
Mohammed. Anytime. Thank you so much, my friend.
You're welcome. Take care.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. You have been listening to the Arabian Traveler Poetry, and this is Mohammed Bader. I want to personally thank you for listening, taking the time. Please comment, follow, or send me an email, thearabiantraveler@gmail.com. Till we meet again, don't forget, for every high, there's a low, and for every laughter, there's a tear. And it's perfectly okay, and it's perfectly normal.